Hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. I have no idea how to begin videos without feeling incredibly awkward, so I suppose I'll just get into it. Today, I'll be going over a little bit of my childhood. And really, I'm currently 27, and it kind of feels like my childhood hasn't really ended yet. I still feel kind of infantile, I guess. Well, maybe not infantile, but, you know, maybe like a teenager. So I feel like a summary of my childhood, it almost feels like a summary of my entire life, which is really hard to do in a very short video. So apologies if it gets kind of rambly. I don't really have a script or anything laid out. So just starting off as far back as I can remember, I was always very shy, cautious, and didn't talk very much. I don't remember as a kid feeling like I was worthless or that I wasn't worth anyone's time. I don't recall feeling that way. I think I was just naturally a quiet, reserved person. And my very early childhood was relatively normal, I'd say. I'd say the biggest detriment that I had when I was a kid was that we lived in an area where no other kids lived. We barely had neighbors at all, but especially not kids, so I didn't really have anyone to play with. But even then, I'd say I wasn't depressed back then. I wasn't like super dysfunctional or anything. Like it was relatively normal. And I'd say the first really bad thing that happened in my life was my parents getting divorced. That really ended up affecting me in I don't even know how many ways. I'd say the biggest was kind of feeling thrown away by my dad because when I was young, like before they got divorced, he was like my best friend. We would hang out and play and do all this stuff all the time together. I'm still pretty big into video games, and I think he was a big part of that. Like, we used to play video games together, we used to watch each other play video games. We used to go out and do stuff, go to parks. So I was really, really close with my dad. And I'm trying to condense a lot of information, but suffice it to say, after my parents got divorced, my dad wasn't really there for me very much. For example, there would be times where we would make plans for me to go over to his house for the weekend and just hang out, do the stuff we normally do. But often, he just wouldn't show up. Um, and some kind of excuse would be made, some kind of like, oh well, next time we'll get to it, and it just never really happened. I don't want to make it seem like I never saw him after that, because I did. I even lived with him a few times, which is another very long story. But I definitely felt like I had to put in the effort to receive his love. I felt like I was almost a burden to him because if he doesn't love me enough to like make time for me and put in the effort to see me, then that must reflect poorly on me. And I still struggle with that. I'd say that's one of my biggest issues. Like, now that I'm older, I logically know that it was his fault. Anything he did wrong wasn't my fault as a kid. There was nothing wrong with me as a kid. I was just a little kid. So I know that it's his fault, but I still sometimes find myself blaming myself for not being good enough. And I think that's where a lot of those feelings come from. Not feeling good enough because I didn't feel like I was good enough for my dad. As far as my mom goes, that's also kind of a complicated subject. I never had any outright problems with my mom specifically. She just did a lot of things that hurt the people around her inadvertently. For example, she would marry and date very emotionally abusive people. We never got physically harmed in any way, but being told stuff like you're useless and, you're just lazy and stuff. They would get drunk and go on tirades. And I can't help but blame her a little bit because she was the adult in that situation and she could have done more to prevent that. But at the same time, I don't want to blame her too much because she's just a fallible person like everyone else and she makes mistakes and I know it was hard on her too. But other than that, I never had any issues with my mom. Uh, we always got along together. Not as much as my dad, though. I was never as close with my mom as I was with my dad. And I think that's another one of the disservices she did for me. Because we weren't very close, so she wasn't really there for me emotionally. She was definitely there a lot more for me, like providing stuff. But when it came to like emotional support, I don't really think she knew what to do with me. So yeah, she was kind of emotionally distant. And again, I kind of don't blame her too much because if I was a parent and I had me as a child, I don't know what I would have done to help me either. So I don't know if there's anything she could have done. And maybe that's me being irrational, depression speaking. I don't know. But yeah, my parents weren't the absolute best. Although I would say my mom tried her best. I'd say as far as school goes, I was actually a very good student early on in school. Probably because I was so quiet and reserved. And I've always genuinely liked learning. So school wasn't so bad for me in like the very early grades. I didn't really make many friends, but I also wasn't bullied very much either. Early school was kind of, I'd say almost neutral in a way. It wasn't overtly positive, but it wasn't that negative either. Things started getting worse around the age of 14. That's when I started feeling like school was kind of pointless for me because I wasn't going to succeed in life anyway. So my grades would drop dramatically. I would stop paying attention. I would stop doing work. I would stop doing homework, getting F's, failing. I failed at least 2 years of high school. It got so bad that for months I just wouldn't go to school. That was, of course, a big point of contention between me and my mom. And she really tried to get me to go at first. But I think eventually something just kind of, some straw broke the camel's back and she got apathetic, I'd say. She kind of just stopped trying to make me go. So yeah, I'd say late middle school and high school were really hard for me. Again, I wasn't bullied very much. A little bit. Probably not more than like average. So people didn't actively hate me, but no one really liked me either. I didn't have many friends. I didn't know how to make friends. I would sit by myself during lunch. I would dread having to be paired up with people to do class assignments. I'd pretty much go the whole day without speaking to anyone. At least the bare minimum amount of speaking. And then I would ride the bus, not speak to anyone, go home and play video games and not really speak to anyone. I didn't have any friends at home either. So I'd say that was pretty rough. I didn't know how to get out of that then, and I don't know how to get out of it now. I think that's why I said earlier that it feels like I'm still in my childhood. I still feel like I'm in those teenage years where I go somewhere, don't talk to anyone, or do the bare minimum, just sit sad, alone, trying to pass the time, waiting for when I can go home to be sad and alone. And I still don't know what to do. I'm 27 and I feel the same exact way that I did when I was 17. My life circumstances are almost exactly the same. Very little has changed in that time. So I'm running out of ideas of what to talk about. So I suppose I'll finish off on a more positive note, and that's my sister. My sister is my best friend in the world. Um, I do live with her currently. We live together, and we hang out and talk and do things together all the time. I'd say without her, I probably would have gone crazy, but I couldn't have made it this far without my sister, and I love her more than anything else in the world, and that's probably the biggest positive in my life. So, yeah, I'd say that's a pretty positive note to end things on. Yeah, I'm still kind of blanking on what to talk about next, so I think I'll just end it there. If you have any suggestions or questions or anything you're curious about, I'm almost a completely open book. I'll talk about anything. Um, I have trouble coming up with ideas myself, honestly, so it never hurts. Thank you for watching, and I hope you continue to have a good day, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.